It's 12 o'clock in Frisco, Texas, and it's time for Smoker Broker Radio with Robert Meche, a.k.a. the Smoker Broker. Robert is the owner of Small World Realty and has employed hundreds of real estate agents in his 17-year career. He has instructed and mentored over 10,000 real estate agents at the highly acclaimed Champions School of Real Estate and is considered an expert in Texas residential realty. Robert is also an advocate of true entrepreneurial spirit and has helped many to transition from corporate America into the world of self-employment. And now live from the studio to your world, the Smoker Broker.
Hey, welcome to Smoker Broker. I'm Robert Meche, and I am the guy they call the Smoker Broker. You want to know why they call me that? Because I smoke barbecue all the time, especially recently. I think I spent this whole past Labor Day weekend smoking barbecue. I think I smoked every type of barbecue piece of meat out there this past weekend. The fall is back in. My God, you would think it's winter in Texas. I want to say it was 60-something degrees this morning. You know, when you are in Texas for so long, and you go through the summer, this is always such a relief time period when you start getting into that mid-September to October time frame. And, you know, it's not like we're in the fall. It's kind of like a trick in Texas. You get this little cold front that comes in September, so it kind of just cools it off a little bit because it's been, you know, in the upper 90s and hundreds all summer long. And then we get to where we're at 60 degrees, and it's just like a complete reversal. But then it kind of keeps doing it for the rest of the month. It goes back to 87, 90 degrees, 93, 95, and then it finally comes back in October. So this is kind of like an awesome, you know, couple of days for us that we finally get to breathe again. You know, I almost put the long sleeves on today because it's just that nice outside. So love this time of year. I also like it because it does let us get back into the barbecue pit a little more often than we have in the summer. It is not that fun smoking barbecue in the summer. It is already dreadfully hot. The last thing you want to do is open up a pit that's at 400 or 500 degrees and stick your face in it. So always love this time of year. Puts everybody in a better mood. At least it puts me in a better mood. So hope everybody's doing well. Happy Thursday to everybody, coast to coast, especially in the state of Texas. Everybody watching us on KVGI Media. We are always live without limits, talking about real estate, business in general, you know, corporate responsibilities and the blahs of corporate and entrepreneurship. All those things are discussed in some way or fashion, although that's probably kind of hypocritical today because we really are talking about generic real estate today. We're actually talking about one of the basic functions of real estate, about entering the property into the MLS. So for once, the show probably doesn't carry as much weight for the general public and the clients that watch us as it does for the agents that are learning how to put that stuff in. But if you are, you know, a neutral observer, you will kind of get a picture into our world as to what we're doing when we put your property into the system. It kind of actually, you'll get the background effect of how does it get to Realtor.com? How does it get to Zillow and all the other things, all the other pretty things that you see on the internet? Because there is a set way that we do that. So I guess it could be somewhat interesting for someone who wonders how it gets there. But for everybody else, we're going to talk about the exact steps we take when we put that in. Now, we continue to address COVID. It becomes a little bit less every week, which is good from a standpoint that it's not absorbing everything we do right now. But it's still out there and it's not going away. We know that. But we do start the show off with always just a little bit of a COVID update as to how it's affecting us. And right now, it does seem that we're trying to get the best control that we can. It seems like we're getting closer to a capping of where, you know, how much further this thing spreads. You don't see as much of a massive outbreak as you have been over the last few months. And the truth is we're getting closer to whether there is a vaccine available. So these all affect the things that we're doing. You have an election coming up. That's certainly going to be an interesting combo to the real estate market. when you have a major election that's very contested across the country, a very divided country, along with COVID, that spells a lot of uncertainty for what it is that we are doing right now. Now, fortunately for us, no matter what the outcomes of each of those things are, it does appear from the real estate standpoint that we're going to continue to move on in a very strong forward method. We are in a very healthy real estate market right now. We do not see any type of hesitation to that. Of course, we keep our eyes on the unemployment ratio. The unemployment ratio can hurt real estate if certain parts of the general public are affected by it. And when I talk about that, I'm talking about those middle management people and upper level management people. If those jobs start to be decreased, then that certainly plays a toll on the real estate market. But we don't see that. We don't see it coming. And even if it does, I talked about this last week, we see kind of a backfill. Even if you see a job loss and hold on people purchasing, there'll be other people that have been waiting to swoop in to support that market. So for us, I almost feel guilty sometimes saying it, but for us, we're in pretty good shape right now. And I don't say that lightly. There are a lot of people. It's funny, this past weekend, like I said, I was smoking for some of my friends. And one of the guys who I didn't know from somebody else, we were talking about this. And, he kind of took, I'm not going to say he took exception to the fact that we were doing well, because he hasn't been doing very well, and he struggled with this whole thing. And it kind of made me do a little bit of a pause as to how I communicate those types of things, because I do realize that there are some people out there that it's just not, this hasn't gone well for it. And I'm not talking from a health standpoint, and we're all in the same boat health-wise. I'm talking from a business standpoint. He was one of the ones that was hurting it. Probably didn't like the fact that we are doing okay. So that is tough, having that conversation out there. There are some people that have visibly been hurt by the business side of COVID. And you always have to kind of keep that in check. And it does make me feel just a tad guilty when we are doing well. It's not like I just totally block out how everybody else is affected by it. So that is something, there is a level of empathy, and there's no greater hope from any of us that everybody eventually thrives once we get a better handle on the things that we're doing. So it was a little bit of perspective from my end this week. So with that said, we are going to get into talking about how we put stuff into the MLS. I always bring my crew on. They do a better job of explaining this stuff anyways. They're knees deep into it day to day. Of course, I like to keep my feet wet, but they're better at it than I am. I got Miss Richa to my side. She's been with me a long time, just a brilliant real estate agent. Everybody's very fortunate to get to deal with her. Probably practices more on the high-end side, but she's capable of selling just about any type of piece of real estate if she wants to. And when I say that, I really do mean it, if she wants to. Richa is the one who decides whether she's going to do it or not. So I love that about her. She sets her schedule. She sets her desire as to what she wants to help and who she wants to help and when she wants to do it. And that is the type of real estate agent we like to have. Got my buddy down there, Mike Dellis, a longtime friend of mine, longtime real estate agent with me too. I always keep forgetting I've known Mike for so long, just friend-wise. I forget that he's been a real estate agent for quite some time. Mike, see you're active. Saw a deal coming through. Looks like you're ready to close on something here. So happy for you there, buddy. Got to see you getting your feet muddied all up in there in the real estate market. And always happy to have you on. You always have such a interesting perspective. Not an emotional guy, but very smart. So I love that about you. All right, let's get into talking about the MLS side of it. So when we go through, and we're at the stage where we've gone through the listing appointments. We've gone through them deciding that we're going to be their agent. We've gone through all the paperwork. We've gone through the actual house appointment where we've taken the pictures, we've taken the measurements, and we've taken the detail of the house. Now, the reason why that's important is we need all that information to be able to do the next step, okay? We have to have the pictures, the house detail, and the measurements of the house so that we can input the information correctly into the MLS so that we're giving an accurate representation of what that house is. Now, this goes to the entire world once we enter it into the MLS. I guess if you want to start with the takeaway, and it's a general one for the general public, If you've ever wondered how that stuff gets so pretty into Realtor.com, or it goes into Trulia, or it goes into Zillow, it's because once we enter it into our MLSs have partnerships with those websites, and they take the data the moment that we enter it, and it goes viral worldwide. When we enter a property into the MLS, the moment we put the submit button in there, that property can be viewed from anybody from here to Shanghai. Anybody in the world can pull that up probably within 5 minutes and see that property out there. So it is a vital process that we use for our business. Now, one thing I want to discuss before we really get into this is the power of the internet itself and the change in real estate for compared to all the decades prior to us, because this is something that the general public really struggles with from an understanding standpoint. Everybody, from when real estate has been around for so long, it used to be accepted that when we're marketing a property, we're out there doing open houses. We have all these newspaper ads, this is way back when, right? Newspaper ads, any type of advertising we get our hands on, because that's what sells, advertising the property. I'll even go as far as somebody putting the old Statue of Liberty suit on, or the pizza, and pointing at the house, because that's the way we used to do things. And what's interesting is that the general public, they still think that that's what should be done. And this is a terrible understanding gap between us and the general public. We still have people that ask us, what are you going to do to market our property? Now, I'm going to put an asterisk on this. I'm not saying that we don't still market the properties. We still do a lot of those things. Some of the most high-end real estate agents have very strong marketing packages that they put out there, and they are going the extra mile. Now, this is an opinion, okay? Because I have a lot of broker friends that watch this, a lot of other brokerages as well, and they'll disagree with me on the fact. They'll say that the marketing, is the key, and that it can improve from anybody else. And I believe that. But I'm also going to come down right below there and say, the bottom line, though, is that property, once it's entered into the MLS, everybody out there can see it. Everybody. Every real estate agent, every real estate brokerage, every office, every person in the general public, everybody in the United States, South America, Africa, anywhere else in the world, they can see that property. They can go into it. They can see the dimensions of the property. They can see the descriptions, the school, the maps. They can see very detailed pictures for those agents that go above and beyond and do virtual tours. It's actually like going inside the house and being right in the house. Now, the point I'm making to you is, where do you define your marketing? I mean, you're seeing your house is seen by anybody who goes in and enters a search and says, I want in this price range, I want this particular area, this particular size of house. Your house is going to show up, and they're going to see it in detail. There is no greater marketing than someone who put their specs in, and your house came up and they saw it. So one of the things very hard with the general public today is the ones that lean on the, hey, what are you going to do for me? I'm like, what? It's almost like, what am I not doing for you? What else are you asking me to do that's not being done? Outside of putting the Statue of Liberty, costume on and pointing to your house, what do you want me to do to drive those people in? Now, again, where I put the asterisk, a lot of the stronger realtors will have built-in networks where they're pushing that property into other places. And we do the same, okay? And that is additional marketing. I'm not excluding that fact. There are steps that other agents can't do that other ones don't that make them better real estate agents. But to sit there and argue that the property is not marketed to the extent that it needs to be, you got to be careful with that. In the end, everybody who wanted to see that property saw it. If you think your house is not being sold because it's not being marketed properly, that is most likely not the reason. The real reason is it's probably priced too high, or there's something weird about it. Those are the two things that most likely will not sell a house. You can argue all day long with me on this, but I'm going to tell you, if I went back and looked at every house I've ever sold, every house I didn't sell, for that matter, if it didn't sell, I'm telling you right now, 99.9999% of the time, it was because it was overpriced or there was something weird about it. It backed up to some massive road. It had some weird type of small kitchen, small family room. There's something that the general public doesn't like. This stuff about questioning whether it was marketed properly is just beyond reasonable if you knew what you were doing in this industry. Mike, Richa, y'all join in with me. I've talked a lot there. Tell me y'all's feelings. Tell me if you agree with that. Tell me if you see it the same way. What am I missing?
So I think the number one thing for marketing, I find, is that it is my responsibility as a real estate agent to take really good pictures of your home. That's key to marketing. If I am not showing your home in the best light possible, then I'm not giving your house the upper hand in the market. So when I see people go out there and they're listing $500,000, $600,000, $700,000 homes and taking bootleg little cell phone pictures, I'm like, what are you doing? You're doing a disservice to your agent, to your clients.
Right.
I think
you're doing a disservice to yourself too.
You're doing a
Right.
disservice to yourself. It's going to sit and sit and sit if you don't take proper angles, don't take pictures appropriately, good lighting, a decluttered home. I think crucial to any other barring types of marketing, if you don't, what you're marketing, if that's not a good quality product, if you don't take excellent pictures of the home, I mean, you're really setting yourself up for failure. So
let's talk about that too, because that's one of the subjects today that I was going to discuss, and we might as well discuss it now. When it comes to the picture side of it, it's funny. There are very few things in real estate that I have changed my mind on over the years. For the most part, I still stick to the traditional basis on what sells a house, and I believe that. But I have to admit, I've changed my opinion on the pictures. I used to be of the belief that the pictures really didn't matter. I believed that at some point because I'm a realist. I'm one of those that I'm like, I don't need to see the house. I'll clean. I know damn good and well what it looks like if I cleaned it. I know what I need to see the structure. I need to see what the size looks like, the windows, the upgrades that are in the house. Those are what I can block all the rest of it out. And I used to believe that the average person was like, that's fine. I get it. I just want to see what the house looks like. I've changed that opinion. As technology has increased, a good picture does make a difference in the home. It does portray the house in such a way that it's very appeasing to the average person. They look at it and they're like, hey, this is really nice. Look at the attention for detail. Look at the upgrades. Look at how bright the house is. You know, we're talking about pictures. I guess one of the takeaways for today for the agents that are watching, especially the newer ones, you should have a professional photographer take pics of that house. They're not expensive. You can find anyone from a range of as cheap as probably $50 to $80 to people that do $250 to $300. There's a broad range of people. That is money well spent. If you start taking them on your own, you're going to experience a couple things. Well, actually, a few things. One, you're always going to have lighting issues. You're going to take a picture, and there's going to be dark spots in the picture, and it's going to make the room look less than spectacular. You might even have sun dots from the camera because you just don't have as good of a camera. You might, and this is the worst part about someone who takes their own pictures, you might actually take a picture of a room that has a yellow paint and it turns out looking white because your flash isn't picking up the color of the room. And that is something that can be very damaging when it comes to your portrayal of the house. So once again, that's another reason that you probably should be using a professional photographer. I'm not even going to get into the subject about those of you that take it with the iPhone. You should not be taking house pictures of with your iPhone. That is, I hesitate to say lazy because I think that's unfair because the iPhone does actually have a good camera, but it is not doing your client the service they need to take that picture with your cell phone. It needs to be a professional high resolution camera that can pick up those things. The other thing that's a mistake by not using a photographer, and I think Richa was talking about this earlier, you're not going to pick up the angles that you're supposed to. Those photographers, they know how to shoot that house. They know how to shoot it to where that room looks as big as it's going to be, as bright as it's going to be, what lights are affecting it. You don't know that if you're not a professional photographer, and it can affect the image of the home. So I used to not believe that that was as big of a deal, but it is.
Well, you were talking about how, clients ask, like, okay, are you going to be marketing it on, like you said, Zillow and Realtor and all these other websites, and why they make it. The reason people like those websites is because there is a user interface. There's a user experience that you have that you really like. Everything is easy to click through. Everything is pretty logical. It makes sense. It looks nice, neat, and clean. That is the same expectation. So if your goal as a real estate agent is to sell the house, you need to put the house in the best light possible where people's eyes are going to be, and their eyes are on their phone or on their laptop.
Yeah,
So
and
then,
I'm gonna take this time to. I don't usually tout Keller Williams as much because we're a general program for all brokerages, but I will. I don't. Of course, I work for Keller and I'm biased towards them, but I will give credit where credit is due. They spend a lot of money into their consumer apps to make sure that experience is as brilliant as you're talking about. That when they go through, that they are excited about it, that they want to see it. It gives them choices. It lets them do what they want. It has artificial intelligence into it. So I will take this a second to brag about Keller Williams because it is one of the many reasons why I'm a part of it, because that's money that I did not have to create that experience. So when Rich is talking about that experience is important. And Keller has spent a lot of money. I'm not even going to quote it, but it's high. I'm telling you right now, to make sure that experience is like the best out there. In fact, they want to be better than any other search engine out there for those particular viewings in there. So that's a great point to make. There is a lot of truth to it. When you got someone like Gary Keller, who basically is the father of modern real estate, saying he thinks it's that important, that experience is that good, I guess it needs to be that good. I mean, it's not like he doesn't know anything. He's been there and done that. And I loved how you triggered that conversation. And that's why I have you guys on here, because that wasn't in my notes today. But that's a big piece of this, is the experience that we have and that we're creating. So I love that. Mike, don't you agree that the changes you've done this for a long time. The search engines have come a long way. It's not like the old Realtor.com where we had 6 pictures, right?
Oh yeah. I mean, you can't, it's not, to me, it's not so much like what they look like on those things. It's how well they interface, how well the iOS and all that stuff. I mean, how can you look at them because you can't blow them up? I mean,
right.
It's all crazy on the screen. You can't do it. So all that new technology has gotten so much better to work from a PC to a laptop to an iPad, all that stuff.
That's the point I was looking for too. The experience on multiple devices. What does it look like on the iPad? What does it look like on the Android or the iPhone? It does make a difference. If your digital experience isn't as great, most people are going straight to their phone or their iPad or their tablet first. Very few people are going to their computers right now to actually view those homes. And the experience has changed, making that home look a lot more presentable online. Another thing I just thought of that's a big mistake if you take your own pics. Sometimes if you size it wrong, the picture won't be as big. And that looks very bad when someone, in Florida is looking to move to Dallas and they pull up your house and you have this little square compared to this big vision of it. So there's a lot of multiple things that are wrong with photos. I just realized we probably can have a show based on photos alone. Honestly, that's kind of
it's a big deal.
Yeah, but it is a part of this intro in there. So I'm going to cut that off. We might come back to that photo section in there. I like that. We might actually have a more full show. Let's go into the actual breakdown for those that are really like, hey, I want to know when I'm going here, what are the things I should watch for? So when you go into the MLS input, once again, the technology has made it easier because it's very self-sufficient when you go in telling you what you need to do. It basically has drop down saying you need to do this, this, and that. So one of the main sections that you start off with, it's discussing the general information about the house. Where is it? What location is it at? What are the tax descriptions, the legal descriptions, all that good stuff. So for anybody that's watching that's a real estate agent, this is the most important takeaway from this particular show. And we always give you stuff that makes it worthwhile watching, and this one's it. Don't you ever manually enter that MLS. Don't you ever go in there and override the system and start putting in the address yourself and the tax description yourself. There is an autofill function in that MLS that once you pull that address out and choose it, it throws all that stuff into the system so you don't have to do it. All the legal descriptions to the exact T, like if it says the subdivision is Oakmont, not only does it say Oakmont, it says Oakmont Section 2, Lot A, Description B. It tells everything about it. You cannot remember all that stuff when you manually go through and input into the MLS. Don't you ever put it in manually to the MLS. You have to actually go through and autofill. It's a huge takeaway. That is probably the biggest mistake you can make. Those of you who are fearful when you enter your first house and you're worried that you're going to screw something up, that is the number one thing. If you really want to screw something up, even getting sued because you entered something incorrectly, that's the number one way. So don't ever manually enter into the MLS. It's an autofill. Okay?
You do not want to put in the wrong lot number or the wrong section.
Wrong section. And
yep.
While we're on the same conversation, it's on the same page conveniently. When it comes to the square feet and the size of the house, there are really only two acceptable legal backgrounds for what square footage should be quoted. One is the tax scrolls, and two, and it's a distant second, is if an appraiser said it was that square feet. Now, one thing I've objected for years, and I still object it to this point right now, I do not understand how those boards that run those MLSs allow there to be any other options besides those two, because they know damn good and well that in a court, if those two options aren't chose, there easily can be a lawsuit if something's wrong on that square feet. Meaning, if you chose the builder plan option, God forbid you chose the owner's word. I can't believe that's even in there. I can't believe the option says that the owner quoted the square feet. You are begging for a lawsuit. If that thing's off 10 square feet, which it easily could be, you're begging for it. The only ones that the courts will say, hey, look, they went off what the city said it was, that's the best they can do. That's the only one that typically holds up in court. And even the appraiser, that one can be a problem if the appraiser didn't do it competently. But most courts will say, look, they hired a professional. That's what the person said it was. So there's really no argument and was a mistake made here. Square feet is a huge lawsuit for real estate agents out there. If I'm entering that thing in, I'm putting the tax description. Now, hypocritically, Richa, what's wrong with the tax scrolls? What's a big complaint that most people have about the tax scrolls out there when it comes to square feet? Or Mike, it doesn't matter to me.
They're wrong.
They're wrong. They are inconsistent.
I wasn't going to say that, but yes, they can be very incorrect.
I'll say it. They're wrong.
That's the word I was looking for. They are inconsistent.
Inconsistent.
That's the word.
No, they're wrong.
Hypocritical that we're telling somebody that the one authority that we cannot get sued on is the one that's usually the one that's inconsistent. So it's very frustrating. Now, anybody who's watching across the country, that's a Texas problem. A lot of the other states, they're much more accurate with their description of what the square feet of the house is. For some reason, the one that we practice in is the absolute worst when it comes to square feet. By the way, while we're on that same conversation, that's why in real estate, anybody in the general public or any real estate agent, when you quote, well, the value on the local CAD or the local tax roll says this, that value means nothing to us. It means nothing, especially in Texas. The appraisal, I've got people.
Assessed value of the house, correct? Is what you're talking about?
Beg for me to sell their house for what the square feet is on the tax roll. I got other people that would shoot me if I put what the tax roll said. It makes a difference. So it's very inconsistent. You have to be very careful. Legally, we go by the tax basis. Most of the time, the owner is aware that the tax basis was off, which is why they then went to the second choice, which is an appraiser, and then we use the appraiser total versus the tax roll. It's a stupid conversation, but that's how it works. Builder plan, owner, and whatever else are on those stupid options, don't ever choose any of this thing, at least if you're in my firm. The rest of you can do whatever you want, but I'm telling you right now, if you don't want to get sued, That's the right way to do it. So that's on there. Those are entered in there. While we're talking about controversial things that can get you in trouble, the schools. You have to go through. This is another objection I have to some of the MLSs. Actually, if I think about it, I have a lot of objections to the MLS. When you go through,
that's a show on itself.
It is a show in itself. Whether the MLS is presents a problem for a real estate agent, or is it encouraging a possible lawsuit? So with schools, you would think that the system is smart enough that when we put an address in, that it could go through and pull which schools go to that particular address, but it's not.
I always, for my clients, check on the school, on the local school website. Like if I know it's in Richardson ISD, I personally go to the Richardson ISD website, enter in the property address, and then go based on whatever it's telling me on the county that, okay, this is the school it feeds to.
Right. So a couple comments on that, because that really is opening the conversation where we're going with this. We manually have to put those schools in. The number one request from someone who's relocating from a different area into our area, no matter where you're at, because it's across the country, the same answer is, how are the schools? Okay. Schools are horrifically important for the obvious reasons to to any client that's out there. When we put that into that system, that's one of the first things they look at is what schools they go to. I think it goes without saying that if you enter that wrong school or wrong school district, actually, I think it might pull the school district. I can't remember, but if
it has a district and the schools.
Yeah. If you put the wrong school in, you're asking for trouble. Okay. Now here's how that happens. And this is what Rich is getting at. When we go in, this is a good takeaway for the show too. When you're taught how to input an MLS into our property into the MLS, you're told that you have to go find the schools, the correct schools, because you're going to have to enter the elementary, the middle, the high, and if there's a mid-level, or whatever we call it, junior high or something like that.
Intermediate, yeah. You're
told that you're going to have intermediary. You're told that you're going to have to enter those schools into it, but it's the way you're taught that can be a concern. There are a lot of agents that are unfortunately taught the wrong way, the lazy way, and that is to go to the subdivision, look at the current properties that are in place, and see what all the other agents put. Now,
what?
Unfortunately,
that's a way?
See, thank God she knows better, because
I didn't even know that was an option.
So
she just found a new way to do it.
I got a really good story about that. And this is true. And this has happened many times, but this is just the one time I caught it. I went in and I was doing it the lazy way. This is actually the conversation that taught me to never do it again. I went into a subdivision, a very prominent subdivision, meaning it had a lot of homes in it. So there's a big sample. I went in and every single home, I want to say there were 35 homes in that subdivision that were for sale. This is when we had heavy inventory way back when, right? We don't see that much anymore. But we went in and every house had the exact same schools in. So I, of course, being lazy like I am, I entered those because I'm like, well, they can't all be wrong. So
yes, they can.
The client actually was a teacher high up in the district. She goes, where the hell did you get that? I go, what do you mean? She goes, none of those schools are right. I go, what are you talking about? I go, every house that's listed right now has it. She goes, yeah. And she goes, and that's been a big problem for the longest time because every one of those listings are currently wrong right now. I was like, whoa. I go, that will be the last time I ever do that. The correct way to get the schools, and you might think it's tedious, but it's the right way. And that's what we do on the show. We teach you the right way how to do things. You contact the transportation department in the school district, the ones that do the bus routes. You want to know who knows what schools go to where? The bus routes, because they have to pick them up. So you call the transportation department, you give them the address, say you're a real estate agent, you want to make sure you're verifying the schools are correct, and they will tell you precisely which schools go to that address. That is the correct way to put schools into the MLS. You can also, most schools are usually good about having a digital map on their website that shows the address and shows which schools go to what. So that's a great takeaway.
You just hope it doesn't change 3 weeks later.
Yeah, they can change 3 weeks later.
They
We don't
can.
want to be
Hopefully, the owner has received notice that XYZ is changing, and those, because this happens. So I've had this experience in Frisco. A lot of Frisco rezones their schools because Frisco high schools don't want a population of students more than 2,000 students in the high school.
Right.
So
you got like 87 high schools.
That's why you have 87 high schools, because they reach 2,000 and they open a new high school. They reach 2,000, they open a new high school. So then they're always redistricting, rezoning. Yeah, so it happens a lot. So you have to be careful. Now, the parents will be notified well in advance, right, through their mail system and everything, that so-and-so changes will be happening. But it is our responsibility to make sure and double check and ask the parents, hey, have you guys received any information from the district letting you know that you're going to be rezoning?
And the other thing, we've talked about this on many shows, in the end, I'm certainly going to take the steps to make sure I know I'm right. But I'm telling you, in the final ultimatum, it is us telling that client, on the buy side especially, they better go verify the schools personally. They're not my kids. I'm not responsible for where they're going to school. I can only tell you what I know. If it were me and I'm putting my kids into a new location, I'm making damn sure that they're going to the schools that I want them going to. And the only way I can do that is if I personally verify myself that that's correct. Oh, allergies. I hope that doesn't keep going, because I've been seasoned like 10 times in a row when I do that. You got to verify. They're ultimately responsible for the verification. That responsibility can never be put on us. They're not our kids. We want to make sure that they're going through the right location. All right, let's see. Where are we at on time? 12:37. That's good. Okay. Let's talk
we've actually gotten to almost the input.
What's that?
We've actually gotten to almost the input into the MLS.
Well, to be fair, we never go through. Each of our shows are built into sections. We're actually leading up to the actual input. So the next show, we actually start putting the input in there. So you're right. There's a little bit of input discussion with it. All right, let's look at another thing in there that you got to be careful of is it's going to give a map. Obviously, maps are key importance to when someone's searching, they want to see where the house is. In the MLS, you actually have to go and click the button that registers what the geo location is of that house. So if you don't click it, it doesn't assign it to where it is on the Google map. So you actually have to tell it what the longitude and latitude is, which is automatically configured when you hit the button on the MLS. So that's a little tip that a lot of people, when they're just trying to do it on their own, they see that map and they make the assumption that the house is located there. You actually have to tell it, we want this to autofill in there. So that's a good takeaway when you're actually entering the MLS. You have to make sure you do that step.
You just have to get the maps go out.
Well, it's funny. It's come such a long way. In 20 years, we used to have to go through the maps go. We actually have to pull the maps. Those people got to be doing terrible business-wise. I assume they're out of business now. That was such a big amount of money every year. You had to go get an updated maps go, but those really aren't viable for us anymore because of the systems that we have in place. So that's actually a good point. We don't see that much anymore. They also have in one of the initial sections in there, it talks about is the property a multi-parcel. You have to actually tell the system that it is that it's only a single lot that we're selling, or it's not multiple. All right, let me look at the chat section really quick. David, good to have you watching out there. Right, definitely on the pictures, we want to make a good first impression. And David made a point we didn't discuss. You don't have to have 50 pics of the home. You don't. And you certainly don't need pictures of the toilet and the closets and the other undesirable parts of the house. That drives me crazy when someone takes a picture of a closet that looks like shit. That doesn't make any sense to me at all. I've never understood why would you have done that. I like the one
or a piece of decoration. Like, okay,
right. Yeah, like that's
great.
Be there. So that's a great point. It doesn't have to be 50 pics. And then David says school districts rezone within the district. Therefore, you need to contact you always need to contact the direct location, the direct school district, which again is the transportation department. So great comments. Thanks for contributing out there, David. Those are all really good points. Okay, let's see what else do we want to talk about here. Let's talk about the actual dimensions of the home and why that's important, because that's a big legal piece of this as well. So when we go through, I told you initially, we took pics of the home and we also took measurements of the house. Now that is important because there are a lot of people when they're searching, they need to know the size of particular rooms because that's going to make a decision on what type of house they buy. Obviously, the ones that are the biggest concern are the master bedroom, the family room, and the kitchen. Those are the three that most people were really concerned about the size. Now, we're going to put the size of all the rooms on there, but those are the ones they're looking for. I will tell you a personal pet peeve of mine, and this is really just an opinion, because this can go either way, and I'm probably wrong versus right on this, but I don't care for the closet dimensions and the secondary bathroom dimensions. I'm like, look, that is of no consequence to most. Those are the secondary bathrooms are typically standard. The closets, maybe if you want to put the master closet, I guess, but in the utility room, unless it's a really big utility room, most people know it's a standard utility. I guess what I'm telling you is I don't want utility dimensions of one of those ones that you walk into the garage and the washer and dryer's right there. So it's like 2 by 6. I'm not putting that dimension on my house. Now, if I have one that's a 10 by 10 and it's a full room with I'll put that. But you have to have some common sense. Are we really giving a good light to what this house looks like? Do we really want to put the obvious that the utility room is like 3 by 3? I just don't think that that's something that you want to put through there. So as far as dimensions go, you want the rooms in the house. Basically, your major rooms, your master, your kitchen, your family room, and of course, you're going to put the living rooms and the secondary bedrooms in there as well. But beyond that, I'm not so sure how far you have to go. Now, here's the real important part of this conversation. It's how you get those measurements. Because just like we started this conversation off with, there can be some legal liability if you're not very careful. And this is the part that I still am not too crazy about that we're allowed to do. I really think there should be a disclaimer on that MLS that says the real estate agent is not responsible for those measurements. We are not professional measuring type of people. We're not appraisers. We can't go in there and say, the average person's like any moron can go through and measure a room. That's not true. And I'm going to tell you why. If you're a traditionalist, you think what I'm saying right now is stupid because you think the average person can't get a ruler and measure the room. Well, that's the problem. We don't use tape measures and rulers anymore. Most of the time we use a sound or laser device that bounces from wall to wall. Now, the problem with that is some rooms don't have a wall. Some rooms are open. So we have to define where we think the room starts. So here's a problem that happens a lot. You go into where you have a formal dining and a formal living combo is what we call it, right? That's usually the front room you come into. You have a sitting area and then you have a dining room and they're all one together. Well, if an agent goes in there, especially an experienced one, and they measure it and they're using a laser or a sound device, which 99% of them are, they're going to go in there and they're going to stand in the middle of the room. They're going to take that measure and bounce it off of their chest. Hopefully the mechanism recognizes the chest is like a wall because sometimes it won't do that. It'll give you an error. So you go in there and you bounce it off and you get your dimension. Well, the problem is when you turn around, sometimes you take a step back or you take a step forward. And if you're off by a foot or two, and I chose the right room because this is the one that comes up a lot. You do that for the living room and you hit it, it says 10 by 10. And then you turn around, you take a step in or you take a step back to do the dining room. And you say it's 11 by 12, you say it's 11 by 11 or 12 by 12. And someone out there who has a really big dining room, which sometimes some people will say that dining room table is important to them, and you just sent a dimension that will not fit that table, they get pretty irritated about it. And I'd be lying if I didn't say that sometimes they actually take legal action to say it was not presented to me in the way that it was advertised. It doesn't happen very much. And those people should be ashamed of themselves that actually sue because they have to know there's a room for error on there. But it can happen. And that's unfortunate for real estate agents. So I really think it's unfair that they allow that type of liability for us because nobody can truly be perfect on that measurement in such a room. We see this in the kitchen and the nooks as well. You know, the kitchens and the nooks are combined. So you get to where you're measuring the kitchen, then you turn around and the measurement might not be right. So you got to be very careful when you're putting these in. For those of you saying, what's the solution so that I don't get in trouble? There's not a solution. All you can do is do the best job you can at measuring the property. And if everybody ever comes back and you're like, look, I did that exactly like I could have. If I was off a step or two, if the court's going to say that I'm in error for it, hey, do what you need to do. But that's not right by you questioning me that I was off a step. I did the best I could. You probably could not have done any better if you were in that same situation. So,
and to help you get the measurements correctly, like you were saying, is so a lot of the spaces now, this open concept space is very, very common now, right? We want open floor plan, which wasn't the case in the 80s necessarily. Right. So a lot of these older homes. So people have knocked down walls, or so you have like a kitchen that flows into a breakfast area that flows into a living room. So to help, a lot of times I'll take painter's tape with me so that I don't do that miscalculation. Like, okay, I took a step forward, took a step back. I'll put a little piece of painter's tape or a coin or a pen or anything so that it's like, you know, your little.
That's pretty thorough. That's
pretty so that way I'm being as thorough as possible. So that way, like you're saying, if somebody questions it, you let them know this is how I measured it. This right here is generally the area that I'm considering is the end of the kitchen into the breakfast area, into the living room.
Got it? No, it's very rare when someone tells me something that I haven't been doing for a long time that's set in my procedures. That should be something that's added right there. I like that. And what
it's just exactly what you're saying, right? Like if you're standing in a spot and you move a foot or two forward and you don't realize it, a foot doesn't seem like a big deal, like you're saying to some people, to the average person, to a real estate agent, right? A foot here and there is no big deal. But like you're saying, if somebody that's like entertains a ton or has a lot of people in their home or has multi-generational families, having a semi-larger space is really important to them. So if you're up by like 2 or 3 feet.
I like the latter part of why you do that. And this is a good takeaway from the show. And again, that's why my guys come on the show. The real takeaway there is if it ever did go to court, you have a lot of people that you've worked with that can say, that's exactly how she does it. She puts down a piece of tape so that she doesn't mess the spot up. How can you question it when you went in there? You didn't do that. At least she went to a central spot and took it. That actually would hold one. And you could actually have witnesses that say, you can have people that vouch for her. Well, every time she came into my house, that's what she did too. Because consistency really helps in that type of situation. So I love that. That's a great takeaway. That's actually going to be something that we add into our procedures. I love that. That's something that I don't teach, and I like it. I really do like that.
What's weird is when, you know, a lot of people, when they first start doing this, they look at the square footage and they see what the tax says, what the appraiser said, or somewhere. And they have a number and they add up, and then they go and they zap all the rooms, and you can zap every single room and add them all up, and they're never going to be the same.
No,
actually going to be off by quite a bit.
Yeah. And that's why we don't want to get into that business. We don't want to get into the business of quoting the square feet or anything like that. We just want to do the best we can to give the best partakeable we think that house looks at. Okay. We're getting close towards the end. I never want to forget our sponsor. We're always so grateful. We're going to put Martin's information down there. You know, you have lots of choices as for a home inspector. We're very grateful that in our SWR group at Keller Williams, we've used the same guy for the longest time. Now, we give our clients choices. We always offer at least 3 inspectors because we want them to be able to choose who's right for them. But we would be lying if we didn't say that Martin has been one of our most loyal best inspectors out there. He's great with the clients. He tells them what they need to know. He's very efficient. We've never had any issues with him in years of doing service with him. He's very positive when he's dealing with the buyers. He has a great bedside manner. He's very respectful to the seller's property. He's the all-around great type of guy that you want inspecting your home. Martin, his information is below. He is with BPG Inspections. You've got his phone number down there. We highly recommend him to anybody who watches the show. Again, Martin, thanks for all the support. Always a great home inspector for us out there. Okay, a couple of things I want to wrap up with. And again, this show, we can actually make this go a lot longer, but we only have about 45, 50 minutes. So we like to hit just basic pieces on each show, and then we come back on another show. We talk a little bit further. I want to talk another piece about is the finance side of it. when you're selecting finance in the MLS section. So it gives you choices, right? It tells you how can it be purchased? It can be purchased by cash, a conventional loan, a VA loan, an FHA loan, owner finance. It has choices as to how it's going to be purchased, what funds can be used. Now, the biggest issue here is when you get into the government loans, okay? There are certain houses and properties that can't go FHA or VA. Specifically, and this is a great takeaway from the show. I didn't find this out until my 7th year because it finally happened to me. Because again, you don't learn unless it happens to you. And these aren't things we teach out of a book. The condos and the townhouses, you have to be very careful when you're dealing with that type of purchase, especially if it's an investor purchase. Because a lot of times what the lender will do on an FHA loan, I don't know why I said investor. I'm talking about just someone who's buying it for a home because investors wouldn't go FHA. When you come in, if you're trying to purchase that FHA, there's a requirement on an FHA loan that says X amount of the dwellings have to be owner occupied. Okay? And there's other descriptions in there as well that I've forgotten over the years, but there are specifications that have to be met. There can only be so many in foreclosure for the lender to give money to that particular unit. If you're a listing agent and you put as one of the selections FHA, only to come find out that that property will not go FHA, nor will it have ever gone FHA, you could have a lot to answer for it. Here's the problem, and this is the takeaway from this. When you're trained, many of you are trained very lazy because the broker just rushes you through. They give you the average rah, and they don't tell you these things. But you're trained to use all the options because that's the best way, right? We want to give every option possible for someone to purchase this home. Well, you can't give an option that's not actually an option. And if you put something in there that's FHA, people have spent money by that time. They've put option money down. They've put earnest money down. They've hired an inspector. An appraisal might have already been done. They might have already had moving procedures in place, only to find out they're not going to be able to purchase this house because of something everybody should have known from the beginning. And the reason why I put those out there like that, those are cost. And I told you, anytime you go to court, the courts, loss has to be proven. You have to prove that there's a loss. Those buyers can prove that there's a loss if it was advertised properly. And I'm going to tell you right now, you want to know what your EO insurance is for? That's one of them. When you do something like that because you weren't trained properly or you didn't know any better, you can't just randomly put finance options out there hoping that they're right. You can't fall back on, that's the way I was shown how to do it. Okay? There are consequences to not properly putting the right type of finance. Another thing that gets people in trouble is the condition of the home. If a house is really trashed out, meaning like the floor has like rodent, all over it, all types of crap all over it. If windows are busted out, if there's holes in the roof, it might not go FHA. All right, so you have to be careful when you're choosing these selections. I like the show today. I was kind of on the fence about, I don't know if this show is interesting and if there's enough takeaways on it. But once we've gone through and we're done with the show now, there actually were about 3 or 4 takeaways that are vital to your process as a real estate agent, and most important, keeping you out of trouble. I don't think this is the most interesting topic that we do, but I got to tell you, there were 3 or 4 things in there that I didn't realize we were going to talk about. But once we did, I'm like, that's super important that you know that. So always trying to make the show worthwhile, giving you something back so that you can take it and it makes you better as you move on. I want to thank everybody for your constant watching. I love all the rewatches. We continue to build our audience. The archive watches are just fantastic. We continue to see a growth of 500 to 700, hoping to get that over to 1,000 because it means that many more people are watching the show because it's important to them. Well, as I always want to thank my agents that come on. They take their time. I appreciate them. They're smart. They add to it. They add things that even I don't know sometimes. So Mike and Richa, thank you for your time out there. Hope everybody has a great week. Enjoy the weather if you're in Texas, and we'll see you guys soon. Take care.